This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Gary Smith.
So before we got on here, Gary asked, "Are you ready?" And I had said, "I'm raring to go." But then I was thinking, is it roaring or raring? Gary, you voted roaring, but did you look it up?
I looked it up and it looks like it's raring.
Yeah, raring to go. So and what is raring, by the way? What does it say on your lookup? And what stage of the metamorphosis of one eclipsing the other? And I'll let you get to that. We got a ton of other stuff. One of the things I'd like to talk about, but I'm fixated on the Fani Willis thing, is I think that we talk Alabama, the IVF decision from the Alabama Supreme Court, but I want to get a guest on for that, because I've got a guy that I know who I've actually tried a jury trial with, was my co-counsel, Francois, and his daughter actually interned for me, and they're in Alabama, and she is pregnant with an IVF baby. So who better than to have Francois and his daughter on to discuss that, which I think would be a spirited discussion. So maybe we'll do a midweek and drop just one episode on that, because it's, besides the legal issue, it's become a political issue as well, and it's fascinating. It
certainly has, and I believe that there is a campaign coming out starting Monday that Gavin Newsom is organizing that's going to be, splashing ads all across our TV screens and all kinds of things. So, yeah, those sound like perfect guests, and I think we should definitely do that.
Yeah, I think I'll text them and see if they'll do it. I said in Fani Willis preoccupied because I think it's also a great issue. Friday night was filings like you can't believe. Did you have you been keeping up with this, Gary? Because I inundate you with things. I have. I mean, I keep up with it regardless of you inundating me with things, but you do send me a lot and I read it all, and it's just absolutely fascinating. It's I had dinner with family last night who have been marginally keeping up with the news, and none of them were really aware of what had happened on Friday night. So it was fun to educate them and kind of give them the lowdown on what's been going on. So for those who aren't in the weeds on this, I'll give you a kind of an update. If you've listened to Reasonable Doubt for any period of time, I've talked endlessly about cell phone records and the way that cell phone records are used in the criminal law nowadays. I mean, I can think of a guy about 12 years ago who was charged with a special circumstance murder case it was a Glendale case that made its way to Pasadena. He was exculpated, and one of the reasons he was exculpated, freed, we ended up suing the city of Glendale, was because of the cell phone records that triangulated. This is 12 years ago, before you even had the kinds of sophisticated records that you have now. I've also, speaking of murder cases, had another murder case where the cross-examination of the so-called cell phone expert has that case was reversed, and that cross-examination is now floating around, and that guy is really not being used by prosecutors anymore, because it's kind of a laundry list, if you will, of everything that could go wrong, did go wrong, right, with that expert. So I say all of that because Friday, the defense investigator for Steve Sadow, who is the lawyer for Trump, filed a motion and a declaration. The investigator filed a declaration. They had subpoenaed the records of I believe AT&T.
Correct, AT&T.
And for Nathan Wade.
Yes.
Now, we may have mentioned previously that we suspected they were sitting on these records, because if you go back to the cross-examination of Nathan Wade, who is the special prosecutor, who says that, and his divorce case is what spawned most of this brouhaha. He says that they did not start he and Fani's relationship, if you will, until a date in November. The phone records, however, and the analysis done both with the software and by the the defense investigator tell a wholly different story, do they not, Gary?
They absolutely do. He used a software called Cellhawk after subpoenaing the AT&T data for Nathan Wade's cell phone, and he loaded in all kinds of information for approximately a year. And he then geofenced the area of Fani Willis's neighborhood, 2 cell towers that are within 2,000 or 3,000 feet of her home. And he basically told the software, anytime this cell phone enters this geofence, you flag it for me. And he specifically chose these towers so that they would avoid the airport and I believe it's 75, a major highway in Atlanta that people would normally use to travel to various places. And he basically said, exclude these things and only tell me when he goes into her neighborhood. Then he further analyzed it and found numerous times, more than one, I believe 2 times specifically, that he highlights in the report, where after midnight, he is on a call with Fani and then drives to her neighborhood and stays there for 3 to 5 hours and leaves early in the morning. And that's important.
Now, raring to go or roaring to go, there's also a comment for a late night phone call. And then apparently, now mind you, it's the phone. So you have a phone and an outgoing call. You do not have there isn't a wiretap. The cell phone company doesn't have the contents of the call. But for instance, there was a call at 11:30, for instance, and then the phone ends up being in the neighborhood an hour later.
Yeah,
is that basically what we're talking about?
Maybe even less, but yes, there's a call initiated late in the evening, and then the phone travels from Nathan Wade's home, in at least one instance, to Fani's home, and then stays there, remains stationary for several hours until the wee morning hours when the cell phone departs. So there is no, obviously, as you said, there's no contents of the call, but that's certainly an indicator. And he further analyzed, all of their interactions and discovered that in the year or so period that he was taking the data from, there were over 2,000 calls and 12,000 interactions, which I presume would be calls and text messages combined. Now, as I thought about it over the course of reading this story, I realized I've been working for you exclusively for roughly a year, and I would say we've spoken on the phone 40 or 50 times. I'd be guessing, I'm not certain, but that would seem to be a reasonable number to me.
That's reasonable for over a year. If you figure, obviously 52 weeks in a year, and you've got a call or 2 calls a week,
something like that. Yeah, it's reasonable doubt scheduling or an issue that you need me to help with at the office or something like that. That seems approximately right and pretty reasonable. 2,000 calls in 1 year is just absolutely wild to me. I don't think I've spoken to anyone 2,000 times in the last year or in any year that I can think of.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And by the way, I may date myself, but if you've got, I'm sure that what the implication is here, that and some lawyer might actually say this at some point during the closing arguments, that if you've got an 11:30 phone call followed up by movement of the phone an hour later, there is a term in the vernacular or in the culture for that. Do you know what that's called, Gary? Or have you been married too long?
I mean, a younger version of me would have called that a booty call, but I have been married for quite a long time, so I'm not certain if that's what the kids are still calling it.
Yeah, and by the way, it predates all of the time period when they were adamant, they being Wade and Fani, that they didn't have a relationship. And it does, however, corroborate Fani's ex-friend, who pinpointed that it happened well before, and I believe in her condo that she was renting out, right?
Correct. That is highlighted in the document where the cell phone expert, names where he focused his investigation, the address. It was based on her testimony.
And my favorite thing, once again, and I've mentioned this a couple of times in regards, and one of the reasons I like this is because it really exposes when your ideology trumps your legal common sense. Do we have a clip from MSNBC on that? Because this prosecutors trying to struggle and deal with this fact really is astonishing to me, because I mentioned a couple of the cases where I've had cell phone records. I can't think of a single recent case where cell phone records were not subpoenaed or a search warrant was executed for them. And almost all of them, they are used by one side or the other, because they give you, by definition, circumstantial evidence of where somebody's placement is.
Yeah, absolutely.
On this question of whether there was a relationship, in a new filing, Trump's lawyers say there's cell phone data contradicting testimony from the DA and the lead prosecutor, Nathan Wade. The Washington Post reports the data obtained from AT&T with a subpoena and analyzed by a criminal defense investigator hired by the Trump team appears to show that Nathan Wade, the lead prosecutor on the case, traveled multiple times in 2021 to the area near a condo that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis was renting, including one visit that appeared to have stretched into the early morning hours fewer than 2 months before Wade was hired in November 2021. Both have said under oath that while they had been friends for several years, their romantic relationship did not begin until early 2022. Barbara, how damaging could this be for District Attorney Willis? How would she try to refute the data?
Then hold on, time out for a second. Now you've got Jonathan Capehart, who those who are not watching, who is asking that question. And by the way, I do not know if Jonathan is trained as a lawyer, but I will tell you that there is some skepticism as to how you refute the data from somebody who has seen this and has seen the declaration, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's more than fair.
And by the way, it fits nicely in with what the sworn testimony, which is direct evidence of the eyewitness who says, I've seen them at this location, blah, 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 and it started before. Anyway, that could also be a hybrid with circumstantial, but let's hear what our former federal prosecutor has to say.
Could this be for District Attorney Willis? How would she try to refute the data?
Well, the data is really actually quite limited into what it is. Prosecutors would use this to corroborate other evidence or for lead purposes. But all it says is that his phone was pinging off one of two cell towers that are in the same vicinity as her home. This is a densely populated area. It is also a location with lots of restaurants, bars, clubs, and other things that could have explained his appearance there. So it doesn't necessarily mean he was at her home. It just means that he was within the area of the two cell phone towers that are also near her home. So I don't know that this proves anything at all.
Yeah. Alex Kazarian, who's my law partner, just tried a murder case down in Compton, and the cell phone records and the phone records were all the prosecutor wanted to talk about in that case. But you can use it for murder cases, but not to impeach somebody. And by the way, you had one of the best lines. Do you have a setup for that?
Well, I believe what you're talking about is one of the things that has been posited is that there are a couple other things in the area near the home that people have been trying to point to. People have been trying to say that, he could have been at the airport because the airport is somewhere nearby. Now, the investigator very specifically said that he picked these cell towers to exclude things like the airport and the freeway that were nearby. But, people have been pointing to the airport. People have been pointing to the Porsche Experience, which is a racetrack that Porsche runs where you can go down and rent Porsches and drive them and try to experience some of their cars. But as I pointed out, I'm no expert, but the Porsche Experience isn't open at 1 a.m.
Well, hopefully one of our listeners will check it out and tell us when they close. But I actually heard somebody saying that. I mean, why? And this is what I mean. Why is it that you could actually try to routinely every day in this country convict people and sentence them to life based upon cell phone records. But here you're going to be dismissive. And the idea that, oh, it gives me leads. No, they use that as circumstantial evidence of somebody being in a location. And then it's up to the defense to fight that. Now, when it basically completely undercuts a story, it could have been something else. It could have been at a bar. It could have been at the airport for 6 hours or something else. And mind you, this was just a small subset of the records themselves.
Yeah, the airport one's fun because, I routinely go to the airport at 1 a.m. and then leave at 4 a.m. That's just, normal business as usual. I looked it up. The Porsche Experience in Atlanta closes at 6 p.m., which is actually an hour later than the one here in Carson, which I would highly encourage anyone to check out if they're interested. That one closes at 5 p.m. But, a great place to go and certainly a lot of fun, a little pricey, but a good time. But, not a very good excuse or explanation for a cell phone, being called at 12:30 at night and then moving into a different neighborhood and arriving at 1 a.m. and staying until 5.
Well, we also talked last week about the kind of legal conundrum that the prosecutors in this case have gotten themselves into. You'll remember that we talked, Gary, and we had Bradley, the snippet of Bradley, who was Wade's former partner,
right,
who got on the stand to testify, and they were asserting privilege because they didn't want him to impeach Wade because he said, I was representing him in the divorce. I can't talk about the attorney-client privilege because of the attorney-client privilege. It's Wade's to waive, not the lawyer.
Right.
It's just a statement of the law generally. And then the prosecutor gets up and says, well, isn't the reason that you really left the fact that you were accused by one of your employees of a sexual assault? And then all heck broke loose because the prosecutor basically undercut the whole argument that they'd been making for the assertion of attorney-client privilege. The judge then says, I'm going to have you do an in-camera ex parte hearing. That means you're going to come into my chambers, his office. Mm-hmm. You're going to have your lawyer there. I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. They've been trying mightily to scuttle that hearing or to get access to it this week. And this judge he's not having any of it.
No, he's quashed every motion that Wade has made, and he's just shutting it down left and right. I believe that in-camera appearance is going to be Monday. So certainly something.
As we film this today, it may be tomorrow. And by the way, you may find one more twist or turn. If it turns out he asks the Bradley,
right,
did Wade tell you that they were involved prior to the date he testified to, prior to the date that Wade testified to, or put in his declaration? For all the people who keep saying this motion has got no legs, there is no conflict, there is no appearance of conflict. If that happens, only if, I don't know, but that would suggest a perjury.
Yeah, and not just for Wade.
What?
And not just for Wade. I mean, that would be a perjury for both Wade and Fani.
Yeah, and then you've got, if that happens, you've got not only Fani's ex-friend who testified under oath that it was prior to the date that they've said. You would then have the lawyer who was involved in the divorce case testify to that, and you now combine that or corroborate that with the phone records. You've got yourself that's about as good a recusal motion as you're going to find. And for those who are trying to say there is a distinction here between a conflict or an appearance of conflict, you have both. I mean, you're going to have to dance around the idea that there isn't an actual conflict, because if you've got somebody who is declaring in the ongoing prosecution and in a motion to recuse, and they are misleading the court, that is an actual conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And Robin Yurty is the friend that we've been alluding to, who testified in this case and has cast some doubt as to the start of their relationship and her former friendship.
We have a
Fani.
clip of her pinning a date down. You love when I do that too.
Yeah, it's fun.
While you're looking, do you want to put up one of the other clips we have?
Yeah, don't think we have any other clips prepared at the moment. I will go ahead and try to find a clip of Robin. We can discuss the Rebecca Grossman case if you so desire.
Yeah, why don't we do that, and then we'll end with your Robert. The Grossman case, Rebecca Grossman who's married to the Peter Grossman, I believe is his name, is the MD who founded the Grossman Burn Center, which for those who aren't in the weeds in California is one of the most highly respected and go-to places for burn centers. And they've done clients of mine and people that I know, and they do great work. She was apparently having an affair and having drinks with, although I guess there was a suggestion that it was an open marriage, with a Dodger by the name of, or an ex-Dodger by the name of Scott Erickson. And the defense here was that he came through, they had finished having drinks together. He came through an intersection. He's the one who hit and had this horrible death occur, murder, which the DA charges murder, and it was not her. She came through the intersection after the fact. And interestingly, for those who are in the weeds with us, the lawyer who tried this case for Rebecca Grossman was Tony Busby. And you may remember Tony Busby, who defended Ken Paxton, and we showed some video of him back when he was doing the defense of Ken Paxton on the floor of the Texas House on the impeachment proceedings. And he had come here and he had done that defense. She almost got remanded the day of the verdict coming in because there had been a leak of some evidence that had been excluded and turned over under a protective order, and the judge did not remand her. However, when did the verdict come back, Gary?
The verdict came back at 3:30 on Friday, and loyal listeners of this show will know that is a hilarious time because that is something that Mark has pointed out time and time again, and we have highlighted numerous examples of verdicts coming back at that time because juries are done and they do not want to go home and have this looming over the weekend that they have to come back and continue deliberations on Monday.
And I'll tell you that the hallmark indication or indicia of a hung jury is if your jury has been deliberating or goes out on a Thursday or a Wednesday, deliberates through a Friday, and then says they're coming back on Monday, you almost always, that's the indicia of a hung jury, or at least somebody is fighting for the defendant.
Yeah, absolutely. And they did come back with a guilty verdict, and she was convicted. She was convicted. She was remanded, and she's facing, the judge he can either give her 15 or 30 as a floor to life, then tack on the lesser. She got convicted across the board. I talked about 4 or 5 years ago, the case I had, a 17-year-old who was charged with murder in a horrible kind of traffic accident case also. And those are just, those cases suck the life out of you. I mean, obviously you never want to, and it's always in there, but for the grace of God, walk I on all angles. You don't want to be on the receiving end. You don't want to be on the arresting end. In fact, I think her name is Nancy Iskander. She and her husband had said how bad they felt about the effect that this had on Grossman's daughter, who was in the courtroom and had screamed, and it was that shows you the depth of despair and empathy that the Iskander family has. I mean, it's just the worst. As I say all the time, I don't even know how you go on after something like that. Yeah, it's just, especially for those of us who have become parents, it's just it's really hard to fathom how you can lose 2 children and still feel empathy for a member of the family of the perpetrator. It's just, you have to have your hats off to those people that they can still find that empathy and that, that love. It's hard for me to really imagine. I just don't know. I don't know that I'm that good of a person.
Yeah, I don't ever want to find out.
Neither do I. All right, now, so as always, I pull these things while we're live on the show, so I have to hope that this is in
Which
fact.
is one of the reasons you also get slammed about the eye flicking. By the way, before we go to this, do we want to have the comment of the week?
Sure, if you like. I've got it pulled up here. This was sent to me while we were doing the show, which is again always fun that you do things like that. But let's see here if I can highlight it. It's this one here. Where is it? Is it this top one here that you've sent?
Let's see. Put it up and I'll tell you which it is. Yeah, I thought this was interesting. I mentioned because it was actually in response to another comment that there is this urban legend I talked about somebody who got $400,000 on a verdict for the spilling hot coffee in McDonald's case. And I said that has been so grossly parodied and taken out of context. And here's somebody who actually went down the rabbit hole, didn't have a grasp on really what happened. She had horrific injuries. She deserved every penny and even more. So you get Sherry 4359. You're the winner.
Yes. Email us reasonabledoubt1942@gmail.com. Send us a picture of you logged into your YouTube account so that we can confirm it's you. Give us your address and tell us what size you would like. And as long as it's not a medium, which we're running low on, I will be certain to get it out for you early this week. And thank you so much for commenting. We really do appreciate it.
Hey everybody, what's up? It's Gina Grad. And when you're searching for the perfect piece of jewelry, it can be hard to find a brand you trust. Alex and Ani has been creating meaningful jewelry for over 20 years, designing pieces that connect you with all of life's important moments. With an emphasis on value, there is truly something for everyone. They've recently launched their everyday collection. I could not love it more. These pieces are made from stainless steel and an advanced water-resistant plating method that doesn't tarnish. It has the look of real gold. It's beautiful. I love these pieces because they feel so classic, but they have so much versatility. Alex and Ani are also featuring some gorgeous pieces that I have right here, like Black Lotus, this gorgeous Black Lotus charm necklace, and their Stay Wild pendant, and their Wings of Protection necklace that have a classic and vintage feel. See that? And of course, you can't forget their signature bangle bracelets, which I'm also wearing. And I have a lot of their stuff. I have the numerology bracelets. I have the hula dancer to commemorate a meaningful trip I took to Hawaii. From classic to bold statement pieces, Alex and Ani makes it easy to sprinkle your personality into each piece or make a truly meaningful gift for someone you care about. Meanwhile, you can take comfort in knowing that you're shopping with a socially conscious brand, as Alex and Ani has donated over $60 million to nonprofits worldwide, connecting fashion and philanthropy in an easy, fun, affordable way. Right now, Alex and Ani is offering our audience 20% off. So check their gorgeous collection out at alexandani.com and use the promo code MIDAS. That's MEIDAS at alexandani.com. Use that promo code at checkout for 20% off your order. Come and get something beautiful.
Okay, and then to set this back up and circle back, what Gary's about to play is a woman who counted herself as one of Fani's friends, who was called to testify by the defense in Georgia to the RICO case, who was kind of denigrated, if you will, by the prosecution. But she turns out she may have been the most truthful person so far.
Yeah. Just to highlight it, former friend. This was someone who had worked with Fani in the DA's office in the past and counted her as a friend, a couple of years ago. But there's since been some fallout, which led her to leave the DA's office and the friendship to deteriorate. So this is Robin Yearty, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Left the DA's office. Was it? Were you fired?
No, I resigned.
You resigned. Okay. Just one moment, Judge. Can you tell us why you resigned the DA's office?
The number of things that was happening.
A number of things that were happening. Is that what you said, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. What was happening that caused you to resign?
spiral of things. So I guess the last straw is I was put in a department that I knew had no knowledge about. Something happened, and I didn't like it. They didn't like it, and that was it.
Okay. Did you have any falling outs with Miss Willis?
Well, we never spoke after that.
You never spoke after that. Okay. And so you're, without going into all the painstaking details, there is no doubt in your mind that from 2019 until 2022, Miss Willis and Mr. Wade were in a romantic relationship.
What's the question?
You have no doubt that their romantic relationship was in effect from 2019 until the last time you spoke with her.
No doubt.
Okay. And that's based on your personal observations and speaking with them and seeing them together and things like that.
Yes.
Okay. No other questions. Thank you. The other folks may have some.
Yeah. So,
one of the things, if you're not watching this, I'll just paint a verbal picture. This is not somebody who wants to be there.
No, she is testifying as, the result of being compelled to. She is not having a good time. She is not enjoying these topics of conversation.
Yeah. So for those who want to denigrate her, I think it's fair to say she got terminated because she brought to the appropriate authorities, including Ms. Willis, things that she thought were inappropriate going on. And her reward was she was never spoken to again and asked to either resign or get fired. And still does not look like she's eager to be there, but there's no, as she just testified, there's no doubt in her mind that it predates 2022. You combine that, going back to the previous clip we had from the former prosecutor who says you use it to corroborate, that's about as good a corroboration as you're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's it's interesting to see that she was the source of information for the defense investigator who used what she had said to kind of frame his cell phone data and what he did there. So, it's certainly a compelling witness who the fact that she doesn't want to be there makes me believe her all the more.
That's exactly right. And that's often, one of the jury instructions you'll get in any jurisdiction, federal, state, or anything else, is that you look at the demeanor and the willingness of the person to testify, whether they've got a bias or a motive or anything like that. You can make those arguments, but here, just seeing how this witness testified, the fact that it was not somebody who necessarily wanted to be there or to take her out, and that was palpably uncomfortable, I think speaks volumes here. Quite a week that we'll have this week, Gary.
Yes, it is. We'll be watching carefully and looking forward to bringing you guys another great episode next Sunday. Mark, thank you as always for your time.
Thanks, Gary. See you.
Be well.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast.